These are the same streets he walked as a youngster, but for 43-year-old Yusuf Bunchy Shakur, the path he now walks is quite different.
My success story is a reflection of my community.
He is an author, educator, and community leader on the streets of his West Side Detroit neighborhood, the very community he used to terrorize out of anger, growing up in devastating poverty.
He terrorized people. He was terrible.
Bad. Bad.
He was wild, crazy, liked to fight.
All he wanted to do was fight. That's all he wanted to do. He liked fighting.
When you look at Detroit neighborhoods, they're nothing but a third world neighborhood. You know, we can identify with a third world country and what that looks like without resources, but we ignore what the third world conditions are here in America.
Growing up in an impoverished community, witnessing violence, drugs, and lacking the basic human needs plays heavily on the psyche of a child, leading to depression, anxiety, and withdrawal.
These children are waking up. They may not have had anything to eat the night before, and there's a good chance that they won't have any breakfast. Some of these children are living in abandoned homes, or there are many abandoned homes on their blocks. It's a war zone. They're robbed, in essence, of their childhood.
If I'm sitting here watching my mother, come home and she's barely keeping, food on the refrigerator, she's barely able to feed or clothe us, that impacts me as a child. I mean, like most people don't realize, if I'm sitting here watching my mama get her ass beat every day by the guy she's dating, that has an impact on me internally. So my self-esteem, my self-worth is tied into my mother's self-esteem. It's tied into my mother's self-worth. So poverty has an internal as well as an external negative impact that ultimately creates a handicap of human beings.
Growing up without his father, who was later incarcerated, perpetuated that anger. He, like 5 million other children in the U.S., was living with a parent in prison. Yusuf was first kicked out of school in kindergarten. At the age of 9, he was arrested for breaking and entering, starting a pathway to prison.
A child who is born into a family with an incarcerated parent already starts life at a disadvantage. There are studies that show that a child with an incarcerated mother or father is going to experience more poverty than an average child. There are attachment issues that happen, and there's a lot of shame and stigma that's attached to having an incarcerated parent.
You have some who deeply resent it, feel that they're being punished for the sins of their father or their mother. The child has to be resilient, or either they find deviant ways to balance or to protect themselves. If we don't grab a hold of them by right then, we're in real trouble, because the next stage is their adolescence. And they're only adolescents partially. They are hardened.
I became good at kicking somebody. I became good at running from the police. But the crazy thing was, when I wasn't doing those things, I was invisible.
At the age of 13, Yusuf started the Zone 8 gang. By 15, he was thrown out of every public school in Detroit he attended.
There are correctional officers that are now staffing schools. The reality is that things like truancy, things like getting in a fight with your peers, things that in the past we used to consider naughty or bad behavior now are seen as criminal offenses.
Putting kids out of school and putting a scarlet letter on them at any age is not good. Kids are out in the street, no one overseeing them except the street. And the street is not the education that you want them to have. The street is going to make it so that they are perhaps a better criminal.
That's what expulsion is for many of us. Like, what do I do next? Where do I go? I don't see no light no more. So, and the light that I see is drug selling, maybe prostitution, maybe killing. I mean, these are the roads. These are the alternatives. I mean, what it does to them, again, it perpetuates a cycle of, I don't give a about you. That's being echoed in your household. It's being echoed when you go to the store.
By 19, following in his father's footsteps, he would join the 2.3 million Americans in prison, serving his own 9-year sentence at a maximum security facility.
You want to know where these people come from. They're not just born this way. They are nurtured this way. You have devised a Frankenstein that has no heart. But the fact is that there's no one telling you that you can make it without being this ruthless monster that you turn into.
So you see that kind of like this pipeline, right, that goes from poverty to incarceration of a parent, to stigmatization of a child being put in an out-of-home placement, child gets in trouble, gets into the juvenile justice system, and then pipelines into the adult justice system.
It was here where his life was changed by another inmate at the Alger Corrections Facility. It was here where at the age of 20, that Yusuf met his father for the first time.
And that relationship that we developed in prison had a tremendous impact on my redeeming and transforming my life.
It was that transformative time with his father, not the prison reform system, that changed his life from predator to protector.
He looked at me and said, the greatest gift a parent can give his child is his precious time. And up to this point, I've neglected you and given my time. And so he painted a picture in my mind of what a man can be and should be. Prison didn't do in terms of my redemption. If it was left up to prison, I'd still be a gangster.
This is where Yusuf's path changed. 95% of prisoners will return to the public, on average over 10,000 every week. For those that don't develop skills, they will join the 2/3 that experience the pipeline of perpetual prison.
They find themselves in that spider web, which is the web of the system, where it becomes a revolving door of selling drugs, using alcohol, and you're in and out of prison, which you ultimately get killed. I mean, this is the rotation of that situation.
They must have education. They have to have education, or they will be educated by the ruthless street. And so we need to be able to develop a reentry that is one that will make sense.
You're trying to reenter society, you want to get a job, you want to get housing, and you're stymied at every turn. And you're hit with all kinds of fines and fees that you have to pay, and if you're on tether, you're $10 to $15 a day on top of all of that. So you're setting people up then to fail. You're setting them up to be caught up into the system again and again and again.
In the last 30 years, Michigan's prison population grew at 29 times the rate of the total population. However, re-entry funding has been cut by 37%. Consequently, many of those who are released do not possess the ability to obtain jobs, housing, and government assistance. That, in addition to the compiling court costs and other expenses associated with their incarceration, lead to daunting, unrealistic hurdles.
What happens to that person who has not developed the skills to make it outside of what they've been conditioned to? Unfortunately, that they still function as a predator, and they don't necessarily understand that they're a predator, but that's what they are.
What I'm saying is they cannot read. So how do you get a job if you can't read? You have to have a skill set. Non-skilled labor is dead.
Michigan is one of only 4 states in the United States that spends more on its prison budget than it does on its higher education budget. We need to support saner justice policies that keep our kids out of prison, that provide treatment rather than incarceration.
Sending many back to the streets doing the exact same thing that got them incarcerated in the first place. Yusuf was able to see the deeper seismic results of poverty, violence, and drugs that perpetuates this cycle.
How many lives do we destroy? How much dope do we have to sell? So in selling dope, how many mothers do we've hurt? How many fathers we've killed or sent off to prison? Now the children have no mother, has no father. That's the cycle of poverty. This is how poverty is destroying black families, destroying black communities.
It is that raw emotion that leads Yusuf to become a pillar of the community by opening up a bookstore, community center, and organize free backpack giveaways in his community.
So we rose above poverty. Even though we're in poverty, we rose above it because of our love, because of our commitment.
And get back on the right path, walking redemption road.